you started it out with maybe that $8,000 contribution, you plan to buy in the next 1 to 3 years, you could potentially not have to pay taxes on any of that money. Is that correct?
Yeah.
On what you could, on your down payment?
Yeah, exactly. So you're as you contribute to that FHSA, exact same as if it's an RSP, you get to use that as a tax deduction, right? So for example, if a client put in $16,000 this year, so they opened the FHSA in 2023, put in $16,000 in 2024, and bought a house in the same time, that $16,000 gets deducted from their income tax. So assume $100,000 income, roughly 33% marginal tax rate. You're saving $5,000 in taxes just from doing that contribution.
Okay, well, welcome back to another episode of Bamford Company. Today we have a good friend of mine. It's Kohl Bauml from MFG Financial. Kohl, thanks for coming today.
Appreciate you having me.
So I know that we talked over the phone about some different things that we could add value to consumers out there, and one thing that you brought up was the FHSA. Just to clarify there,
Yep.
what exactly is that for all of our consumers out there?
Yeah, so it's a new investment account that got introduced in April of 2023 for people who are looking to buy their first houses. And in its core, it's really just a combination of an RSP and a TFSA. And quite frankly, I wish I had this account available to me when I was buying my first house, because it really is the best of both worlds. On contributions to the FHSA, you get a tax deduction, like as if you were to do it for an RSP. But the big difference is that on withdrawals for a qualifying home, your first house, they are tax-free, and you do not have to repay them back if compared to the home buyer's plan if you were to withdraw money from your RSP to buy your first house, right? So it's a combination of the RSP and the TFSA where, quite frankly, you get the both best characteristics of both of those accounts in one simple package.
Sounds amazing.
It's unbelievable, yeah.
So with this is that I know that there are some different things about how much you can contribute to on a yearly basis. Can you clarify a little bit on that? Just because
For sure.
I know everybody's purchasing power out there is a little bit different, and this might put it in perspective for the average consumer.
Yep. So I'll start with how you accumulate contribution room. So you have to open the account to start generating or accumulating that contribution room. And for every calendar year that you have it opened, you get $8,000 of contribution room up to a maximum of $40,000. So 5 years essentially. Right. On a yearly basis, you can contribute up to $16,000 in one calendar year. Simply, you can carry forward 1 year of unused contribution room. So if you opened it in 2024, the maximum you could do would be $8,000. If you didn't contribute anything in 2024 and carried over to 2025, the maximum you could do in 2025 would be $16,000. Okay. Fast forward even further and you get into 2026 and say you haven't done anything yet, and now your total contribution room is $24,000. The maximum you can do there is only $16,000. So you can only ever carry forward 1 year of unused contribution room in that calendar year. So there's a little bit of finessing and playing and strategizing for when and how much to contribute to the FHSA, which is, again, very case dependent and client specific, but there are ways that you can best utilize the account depending on your situation.
Right. Well, that's where you come in.
That's right? Exactly where we're supposed to come in. Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
For example, I've been fortunate enough that, a lot of my friends and a lot of my clients have been buying their first houses this year, and each one has been a little bit different with how we've gone about it, and the strategy behind each one is always a little bit nuanced to each client and friend, right? So we work with the client and figure, okay, when are you trying to buy your house? Do we need to be contributing now, or can we wait until I've got an offer in on a place, or I'm seriously considering buying a place to then contribute, right? Because the biggest thing that we're trying to do is to provide flexibility for our clients, right? Because we understand that life happens, right? You don't want to put money into the FHSA just for the sake of putting it in there, and then all of a sudden your car breaks down, or a trip of a lifetime comes about where you want to go and go on a trip with your friends and family or whatever it might be, right? So we want to be able to provide that flexibility still and not locking away money into the FHSA. So it's all about timing, and when are you seriously looking to buy this house, or are you just kind of tippy-toeing around and getting feelers out there, or are you actively looking? Do you have an offer in place? Do you have an offer accepted? Okay, we need to get our wheels turning to get things moving properly.
Okay. So then when you're saying is that it's kind of a timing basis, so the biggest thing is to get it started, correct?
Yes.
And then is that you get that grace period, maybe of that extra, if you miss that calendar year, is to get that 16,000. That makes a big difference for somebody, even when you look at the average home as a starting home, like for single family, we're probably looking at 400 and 450 just to get into, a decent neighborhood. Doesn't mean it's the best house, but it means, but that is getting you in that ballpark. So if you started it out with maybe that $8,000 contribution, you plan to buy in the next 1 to 3 years, you could potentially not have to pay taxes on any of that money. Is that correct?
Yeah.
On what you could, on your down payment?
Yeah, exactly. So you're, as you contribute to that FHSA, exact same as if it's an RSP, you get to use that as a tax deduction, right? So for example, if a client put in $16,000 this year, so they opened the FHSA in 2023, put in $16,000 in 2024, and bought a house in the same time, that $16,000 gets deducted from their income tax. So assume $100,000 income, roughly 33% marginal tax rate. You're saving $5,000 in taxes just from doing that contribution. If you were to push it out even further, and all of a sudden it's $40,000 that you've been able to contribute over the lifetime before buying that house, 40 times 30% is what, 15%ish, something like that, or 15 grand. So it makes a big difference.
For sure. So you mentioned that you had some friends and some people that you've went through the process with recently. Was that the same case for them, that they were able to save, that much, or just with the timing, was it a little bit easier to be, was it more around that, 16,000, 24, and not everybody's going to get up to that 40,000 to be able to do that, to wait, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so for my clients, because they've been able to buy their first houses here relatively recently, they only were able to contribute up to that 16,000 and get roughly about $5,000 in tax savings. I've got a couple that are still accumulating that room that, they don't really have a time frame on when they're looking to buy that first house. They know they want to, but they're not in any rush. So, over time, we will see that the savings in tax for clients is going to grow, because we are going to be able to contribute more and more and more, because they are delaying when they're going to be buying that house for themselves.
No, it makes a lot of sense, and it's a great piece of value for people to know that's there for them.
Yep.
Now, in regards to first-time home buyer, how do we justify a first-time home buyer? Maybe you can take us through the government's
the government definition. So it has to do with you not living in a house that you or your spouse have owned in the previous 4 calendar years. So if I owned a house 6 years ago, sold it, and then was living in a rental property for the last 4, I would qualify as a first-time home buyer again.
That's amazing. That's good information to have.
Yep.
So, Kohl, if someone was looking to have some further help with the FHSA, how would they go about and do that?
There's lots of really good pieces of information on the internet, to help educate yourself around what the best ways to utilize it for yourself, and try and figure, okay, what is the way to use it in my situation. But as sitting in my chair as the financial advisor, I always like to say that we are the professionals. When I go to the doctors, I'm not trying to say, hey, I think you should do this, that, and the other thing, or going to the dentist and say, I need you to try and fix my molar because of this. So I always try and say, let your financial advisor really provide that value and service that they've promised you, and why you're working with them, right? So ask the tough questions of your financial advisor. Is this right for me? Do I qualify? What are the best strategies in terms of timing? Lay it all out on the table for them, and let them kind of pick up the pieces and paint that picture for you, because quite frankly, that's what you hire your financial advisor to do, is provide that value for you. People can do it by themselves. There's no doubt about that. It's just, if you have an advisor that you trust, I always suggest to go to them and get their take on it, right? Because they might see something that, you might have missed. They might not know something about you that if you didn't have that conversation that they would miss, right? So you really got to collaborate with whoever your trusted advisor, your trusted professional is in that scenario, to really be able to get the maximum out of it is how I always try to approach it with people.
For sure. We live in a professional world at the end of the day, and we all have our specialties, and it goes a long way. Now, I understand the side of the savings of the tax dollar is it, when we're able to purchase a home. What's the worst case scenario though? Like, what happens when, say, life happens, maybe something unexpected and they're not going to be able to buy a home in Canada. Maybe they're going to move out of the country. What would be worst case? Is that would they just have to pay tax on what they've put in as they took that money out? Or
so there's a couple different scenarios. If life happens where I need money now, but it's not for a first-time home or a qualifying withdrawal, it simply acts as if it's an RSP where the money you pull out, you would be taxed at, right? So quite frankly, assuming that you're pulling out at the same tax bracket that you put the money into, it's a net zero effect, really. Okay. You're not gaining anything in that regard, and you're not really penalizing, but you're not using the account to its full potential. So that's if you need the money for a non-qualifying withdrawal. But if, for whatever reason, you've gone 10, 15 years, and it's just like, home ownership isn't in the cards for me, or because of whatever reason it might be, there are ways that you can transfer it. You can transfer it to your RSP, essentially, is the easiest way, right? So instead of just sitting in the FHSA, it can transfer over to your RSP. You don't get an RSP tax deduction because you've already gotten that from contributing to the FHSA. Right. There's no penalties in that regard. It just acts as an in-kind transfer, basically. So the client, the investor, isn't penalized for not buying a first home, right? That's not the intent of the cutoff period of the FHSA.
Right. Well, all in all, it sounds like if you're actually planning on purchasing a home, there's really not a whole lot of other better solutions out there, is there?
No, it's funny. So again, being lucky enough that I've been able to work with a lot of close friends and close family in my profession and in my job. I was banging the doors down in December and November of 2023 saying, guys, I need you to open up this account because of all the benefits that it provides from opening it in 2023 versus 2024. Right. And a couple of them, we said, yeah, okay, we'll get around to it. It's December 20th and I haven't gotten the text back, and I'm banging on the doors. Like, guys, we need to do this. Like, this is a no-brainer win-win-win scenario for you guys to be able to have this account open and available for you guys, knowing that you guys are looking to start buying your houses here in the next 2, 3, even next year, right? So it's a no-brainer. Like I said off the start, I wish I would have had it for when I was purchasing my first house. And to anybody who is in that stage of life, even if you're not ready to contribute $8,000 or even $1,000 to it, get it opened as soon as you can, because that's when you start accumulating that room to be able to take advantage of it later down the road.
Well, that's good. Is it not every financial planner is knocking down people's doors and sending that many texts? Yeah, that's good. That's good that you got that.
I was throwing acorns at a guy's window, getting him to come down. He was working nights and everything, and he wasn't answering my phone calls, so I was having to throw acorns at his window, waking him up, sort of thing. So it was pretty good. Pretty good story that I like to tell every once in a while.
Well, that's good. Going the extra mile.
trying to. Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's great, Kohl. I really appreciate you coming on here today, giving us some really valuable information for all of our clients. Maybe if it's for parents that are looking to help their kids on their next adventure and to get into the housing market. We know that everything's has made a huge adjustment, and that's happening more often than we see, right? Yep, so exactly. Great information. I'd love to have you on again. If you are looking for any of the details on Kohl or MFG, please look at the descriptions at the bottom. We'd be happy to pass off your information there. And thanks again, Kohl.
Thanks for having me. You betcha.
Yeah, sounds good, buddy.